Welcome everyone to another session of TriTech University. My name is Bill Steppen, and today we are finally wrapping up our our inaugural long-running series concerning module mechanics. And we're focusing today on the repair and service module. So for those of you who do have a service department and either have been using this module to track your services or are contemplating using this module to track your services, hopefully you're here today to find out more about how you, can take advantage of this module. So we're going to be diving into how to set up some of the common maintenance elements with this, such as status codes and service tables, things that you'll be probably using on a daily basis, or at least a regular basis if you are contemplating using the module. And then we'll get into how to actually key in service tickets efficiently and make use of those. We'll talk about how that works as far as what's being serviced, what the service actually is, who's doing the servicing, and then we'll wrap up with how to get around the module, some common reports that might be handy and helpful to make sure that services are being concluded and organized and tracked. But as always, we're going to start off with a little bit of housekeeping. So we are using GoToWebinar, and you've probably heard this a million times if you've been a faithful student of TriTech University. But for those of you who are brand new, first of all, welcome. We're happy to have you here, and we hope that you get a lot of good information out of these webinars. And with GoToWebinar, your primary means of communicating with me can be found on that GoToWebinar toolbar in the form of a questions box. So at any point throughout today's webinar, if you have a question, feel free to punch it into that questions box and submit that. I'll be reviewing those questions throughout the session and answering them as I'm able to. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the session of the webinar, so that hopefully we can get all of your questions answered. But if that toolbar is taking up too much screen real estate and you'd like to reduce it so that you're able to see the full bear of what we're covering as far as on-screen activity, there is a little orange button with a white arrow. You can click on that, and that will shrink down the webinar toolbar so that you can focus on the content. With that being said, so let's go ahead and take a look at my AIM-SI screen here. So once again, we are using a music demonstration kind of database that I've got here. If you are not in the music industry, hopefully everything should still apply as far as the content or the concept, maybe not the content so much, but if you, again, if you have any questions, just let me know, and we will cover them as best as we can. So as always, we're going to start out in the maintenance menu. So you'll notice in the maintenance menu of service, there's really not a whole lot going on here, and we're not even going to talk about half of these items here. We're going to get into service letters probably far down the road, maybe even today if we have some time. But the main day-to-day elements with the service module are going to be the status codes and the service table. So when we talk about a status code, if you think about a repair or a service ticket, when a service ticket is opened, quite honestly, you're probably not going to be taking care of it right then and there. It's not like a sales invoice where you're just going to check the item off as sold, take a payment for it, and that's that, and then that's all there is to it. With a service, you're probably checking the item in, you're getting the sob story of how the child sat on the instrument and now they can't play it, or why let's say it's a vacuum cleaner and they swear that rug just jumped out of nowhere and got itself bundled up in the roller, out of nowhere, and now the motor's exploded, or whatever it might be that's being brought in for servicing. But regardless, the technician is going to have to take a look at it. They're going to have to assess what the actual problem is. They might need to get back on an estimate that the customer is going to have to approve as far as the cost is concerned. And none of this is going to happen instantaneously. So you're able in AMSI to track the status of any given ticket. And the system comes with 4 status codes to get you started. So you can see here that we have a couple statuses of work order, estimate, completed, and invoice in no particular order. And then actually that was a very particular order, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So with each status code, there is a description, and that's going to be what the actually is going to show on the listing when you're selecting a status. There's a receipt header, so that's what would actually print at the top of the service ticket when you're printing it out. The status here is basically just a little kind of internal code. You're not really going to see that hardly anywhere except for a few tables here and there. You can establish how many receipts you would like to print as far as like an override when you are printing copies of the service ticket. And we'll talk about that in a moment as well. There's also a whole section of receipt notes. So depending on the status, you may want to have different things printing out on the ticket. And then up here at the very top, there is also a code. And there's 2 options there for either service not invoiced or service invoiced. And what you might notice is if we just take a look at all of these different status codes, the only one that is mentioned as being service invoiced is the final invoice option. So let's talk about what this means here for you. So the receipt header, as I said, that's basically what's going to print at the top of the ticket. Now, when you're first taking a work order, again, if we kind of think about the process flow of a service, the customer is probably going to be dropping it off, and you're probably going to be taking that item back to kind of an initial staging area. So where all incoming service items go for the technician to work on. And in some cases, there may not be a computer system in the service area, so you'd still like to be able to let the technician know what it is that they need to work on. So when you're first taking an initial work order, you may want to have 2 receipts print out, one to give to the customer as confirmation that yes, they did drop the item off, and then one that goes along with the item so that they have the technician can take that. It can be either affixed to the product using maybe some tape or whatever you want to do with that. There is also a barcode function where you could actually print a service label that contains the ticket number, and you could scan that, and that would bring the item up in the computer system very easily. We'll talk about that as we go along, but it wouldn't have like the actual details of what's being serviced. A receipt would. So if it, let's say if you were doing a restring of a guitar or a replacement of a belt or the cleaning of a firearm or whatever it might be, this way the receipt would have all those details. So without having to do anything special, you could set this up to print 2 copies. Now, as far as the receipt notes, for other types of statuses, let's say, for example, completed, without having to do, again, anything extra special fancy or anything, the receipt note here could be something along the lines of thank you for using such and such service shop. Your item is ready for pickup. Our hours are blah, blah, blah. And if you attended Wednesday's seminar or webinar on email functions, as I mentioned, anything that could be printed in AMSI can also be emailed if you have the email capabilities module activated. So something like this, when the technician is flagging a ticket as being completed, and it would like to ask, it's going to ask if you'd like to print a copy. Well, instead, you could check mark the email option, and this would go right off to the customer, and that way they'd have an immediate recognition of the fact that their item is ready for pickup. So the receipt notes can be, again, specific to the status code. Maybe you're going to have some kind of verbiage on the estimate version of, we are waiting to hear from you, blah, blah, blah. Again, our office hours are something, something, something. Whatever you want to have specific on the receipt note and specific to the status code. So there's going to be some other things that will come back here too, again, if we have some time. But for the most part, when you're first getting started with the service module, all that you really need to worry about, if anything, because again, these are all here for you to get started, are the descriptions, whether it's invoiced or not, and that's basically it. So we'll come back to this if we need to, but that's kind of just an overview of the status codes. Now, the other thing that is helpful, it's not necessary, but it can be a huge time saver for you in the service department, is what's called the service table of your service maintenance area. The idea behind the service table is, in many cases, you probably have a series of common services that you offer that are fairly standard, and for all intents and purposes, you can say costs a certain amount of money to the customer and will take a certain amount of time. The idea behind the service table is, by putting those services into this table, you can select them from a drop-down list, and basically the system will fill in all the details regarding that service for you without having to key them in manually each time. Now, this serves two benefits. One, it's a lot faster to be able to just select from a canned list. And two, if we're talking about a process, again, where maybe the front counter sales clerk is checking the item in, and it's not the actual service technician who has the experienced eye and can give a real good estimate of what the problem is, or even what the common services are. This way, your technician, or excuse me, your sales folks up front have a list in front of them of what's available for the technician to be able to do. And we've just got a couple examples in here. Again, this being kind of a sample music store. These are all music related. But the idea behind the service table is they're going to be linked to a category and or subcategory within your inventory. Now, this has been kind of a confusing element, so I'm going to try and give some examples as we go. And if nothing else, when we get to the service ticket itself, hopefully this will be making perfect sense. But you can see how, for example, we have a couple examples up here along the top. For example, a restring. I'm focusing specifically here. You can see where the description is restring and then does not include strings. Notice how this is assigned to the fretted instruments category. And for those who are not in the know, fretted instruments are basically your guitars. So regardless of the type of guitar, so we're not selecting a specific subcategory of electric bass or electric guitar or anything like that. We're saying it applies to all subcategories, meaning that when someone brings in a guitar and you specify that it is a fretted instrument being serviced, the options that are on this table, so anything that you see here that's labeled as fretted instruments, would show up on a drop down for you to select. The explanation I like to give is, you would not restring a drum, or you wouldn't repad a ukulele. So the idea behind that is, only the relevant service items would show up to select when you're looking at a new service ticket. And that way you're not having to scroll through or sift through the entirety of your service table to find the items that you want to quote your customer on when they're standing in front of you with their broken Strat or whatever it might be. So you can see we got some things on here for like regluing necks, regluing bridges. Outside of the fretted instruments, we have a couple of flute-specific repairs for repadding standard flutes versus open holes and overhauls and all kinds of things. So we're going to see this in just a moment, but that's kind of the idea. You can fill in all of the relevant details so that you don't have to worry about doing that on the fly. You're going to specify what category and subcategory your inventory is that would be applied for this service. The category to charge, which in most cases is going to be a service labor. This is basically your non-inventory category listing. And in most, if not all of these scenarios, this is where your money is going as far as your revenue. So there's a service labor option that goes along with that. Now, if you are establishing different non-inventory categories to keep track of different types of services, then of course there would be other options that you might select from on here. But again, in 99 times out of 100, you're probably just choosing the service labor category to charge. The description is exactly what it is. The rate is how much you're going to charge for that service. And then if there is a time that you would like to specify that it would typically take, you can put that over in the time field. And if there's a technician that would normally be the person in charge of performing this service, you can select them from this default technician list, which, as you may see, is really just your employee listing. Now, whether or not that employee actually has the ability to log in and do things, that's entirely up to you. But at least by having them as an employee in the system, you can then assign them to be a technician that is performing the specific service. Now, there is a field on here for service interval. Quite honestly, I'm going to recommend you just ignore that field. Service interval is probably not going to be useful for you. I'm going to actually just kind of get that out there. The idea behind service interval is if you have, let's say, heavy equipment that does need to be serviced every XD number of hours, then let's say you're going to do an oil change on your earth mover every 6,000 hours or whatever it might be. This is something that we did add as kind of an offshoot for someone who was planning on using the service module for that. I just wanted to mention that so that there's no confusion as to what that service interval actually is. And then if this service no longer is something that you offer, maybe it was a specialized service, you can always flag it as being inactive, and in that way it won't show up anymore. Now the notes, as far as this field over here, would print out automatically on the ticket, and then that way you don't have to specify them each time. Maybe it goes into some detail as far as what the technician's going to do. And then the pop-up notes are employee facing. So the idea behind that is if you want to remind the employee who's selecting this service that they need to mention something to the customer, or that they should be offering something, or just some kind of general reminder, you can put those in as pop-up notes, and that would go along with that. You'll notice there is a second tab here for parts that go hand in hand with the given service item on this table. And if you do use either certain parts from out of inventory, or you're always using certain things in relation to the given service, then you can add them to this table and they'll automatically get pulled in when you select that service to be added to the ticket. Now, this does still also allow for non-inventory categories. So what I wanted to mention here was, let's say that in this case, we're working with the reglue of the bridge. Maybe you don't necessarily actually inventory the glue in your service shop, but you would like to charge a couple of bucks for miscellaneous shop supplies. What you could do is over here on the parts tab, you could put in a quantity of one, you could bypass the SKU field, and in the category to charge, you could go down to the option for service parts. You'll notice that this is actually listing out inventory categories as well as non-inventory categories, and service parts is a non-inventory category. So then in the description, you could type in something like miscellaneous shop supplies, and then the price each, let's say, is $5. And then by flagging it in that fashion, basically this would get pulled in with that description. It would affect the service parts category anytime you pull in the reglue bridge option for your service. So we'll see that in action in just a moment. But let's go ahead and save that. Hopefully the idea of the service table makes sense. I'm going to show you an example here right now. So getting away from the maintenance menu and now switching over into modules. And I will mention that this whole process is available in point of sale as well. But just to kind of keep things kind of easy to follow, hopefully, we're going to stick to the service module itself. So you'll notice when we're looking at the module menu, it kind of starts off right at the top with new service ticket. And then, as I mentioned, services are usually a long-term thing, maybe a day or two or more. And so you'll always have the option of modifying the service ticket afterwards. And again, we'll talk about this whole process as we go. But let's start off with a new service ticket. So when we go to the new service ticket, of course, it's going to want to know who the customer is. We'll continue to pick on our wonderful guinea pig, Mike Anderson. And this brings up a new service ticket. So I'm going to just kind of highlight a few fields here, or a few sections. So kind of up here in this area in the upper right corner is kind of the details of the ticket in question. So the date of the ticket, there's also a promise date of the ticket. And then there's the status right here, and of course who it's for, the location, the tax authority, the employee. Now we're going to talk about this employee here in just a moment as well. But that's just kind of some basic details. Then in the middle, and again, I wish I could kind of pick a different highlight color, but in the middle, you've got the item that's going to be serviced. And then right below it in this table here is the table of services and or parts that you'll be performing to the item in question. And then everything gets added to this table via the buttons that you see over here. So let's go through this now kind of a little bit slowly, and then hopefully everything will make sense as we go along. So first and foremost, the item being serviced. This is where the cursor will start when you are front and center just opening up a service ticket. If the item has a barcode, you could go ahead and scan it. The idea here is if it's something that you've either had in inventory previously, or another way, shape, or form have had a record of the details of it, it'll pull all those details up. Let's say it's a GT 1001 for a guitar. This letting me know this isn't associated with an account because this happens to be in inventory. So you'll see it pulls in the category, the subcategory, the manufacturer, the model number, the description, etc. And that also makes this add service button available, the one that I'm kind of highlighting over here to the right. And when I click on that add service, it's going to pull up the option for filling in services. And I could just go ahead and type in the quantity and the description and the rate of the service. But in this drop down up here, you'll notice that we have basically everything relating to, in this case, fretted instruments. So there's the re-glue bridge, there's the restring, the re-glue neck, etc. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and pull in that re-glue bridge, and basically it would then have pulled in the quantity and the service and the category and then the rate and all of that. And basically I'll just go ahead and hit save on that, and that gets added as a line item. So you'll see down here we've got the line for re-glue bridge, the rate, and then right below that, kind of indented, is the part or parts that are affiliated with that particular service. If I add another service, let's say I'm going to re-glue the neck as well, you'll see that that gets added as its own separate line item, but there's no parts associated with it. See how there's this kind of this little section here where if I click on that, I can hide the parts relative to the service, and if I click on it again, it'll show them. If I do the same thing for the neck, because there are no parts, there's nothing to technically show, so nothing is going to get clicked. If I want to add a part to that service, I can click the Add Part button that's over here, and that pulls up my little parts menu adding type field. So I could put in my quantity. Let's say it's a quantity of 1. Maybe I am going to pull a new neck from inventory, so I could scan in that SKU. I could use F6 to search it. Regardless, I'm going to just do the same thing I did before, where I'm going to do category of service parts, and let's just call it again another miscellaneous shop supplies. I could type, there we go, and we'll just do $2 on that one. So we'll go ahead and save that. And you'll see now how, because I was highlighted on reglue neck, that's getting affiliated with that particular service. If I was highlighted on reglue bridge and I add a part here, and let's just pull in a pad just to keep it quick and easy, you can see how that gets added to the reglue bridge. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete that part because it doesn't really make sense to have a pad for regluing a bridge. So hopefully that kind of makes sense there. That's kind of the idea of how this works. You might have noticed that as I've been adding these elements in, down along the bottom, it's been adding in labor. So that's basically anything service related. And then parts, anything that I've added in as parts are getting subtotaled into the parts area. It then subtotals that up. And then if anything is taxable, and in my particular system, the labors are not taxable, but the parts are. So you can see how it's coming up with a tax estimate. And then the total amount is coming up over here in the total field. And if I need to, I can take up to a full deposit of the estimated service amount. So over here on the right-hand side, there is a deposit button. And if I click that, it lets me take a deposit against the service. So let me actually just kind of do this because I think there's enough room to kind of do that on screen without being too wonky. Where I could say, let's say I'm only going to take $30 down or $35 down. I could put in deposit amount of 35. I'll hit save on that. So you're going to see that it's now showing amount paid of $35 down here in the lower right-hand corner. And when I go ahead and save this, and I'll go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to click over here where it says Save Service Ticket. And it's going to ask how that $35 is being paid. Just to keep it easy, I'm going to do 2010-5 for an easy 35 in cash. I'm going to finalize that transaction. I'm just going to print this to the screen so we can kind of see what this looks like together. So up in the upper right-hand corner of the printout here, and I'm going to try and make this a little bit easier for everyone to see. Come on, let me shrink you down here. Come on. All right, we're going to get this here one way or the other. Well, all right, it's being difficult. So let's just look at this if we can here. You can see how in the upper right-hand corner, it's showing the work order. That's again, the kind of the receipt header that would print. It is then doing the item kind of in the middle there. So the guitar, it's showing me the services, and then it is showing that I took $35 in cash as basically a deposit, and then that's all printed out. And again, you might have two copies of this printed, one to go with the customer, and then one to go with the item back to the service department. So that's, again, kind of the idea behind how that all works. Now, when you go to actually work on it, you would then go back into the service menu and you would modify it. You can modify a service ticket straight up, and when you select modify service ticket, it's going to ask you to select the customer. So we'll go ahead and select Mike Anderson again here. And if the customer only has one service ticket open, it'll take you straight to it. So you can see how I didn't have to select anything else. It goes straight to the service ticket that we just opened. And then from here, I could maybe change the status. I could add or remove any other services or parts or anything that's going along with it. And basically, it's a full way to modify the service ticket as we go. So that's kind of the concept there. Now, there's a couple of other ways of getting to it. You can modify a ticket by a technician. And if we go to modify ticket by tech, it will default to the person who is currently logged in. So if I just go and grab my highlighter, you can see that up here I'm currently logged in as default employee. And so that's the technician that is showing here. Now, I don't have any services assigned to me as the technician. So you'll notice nothing is showing up down here as far as things for me to work on. That's where the difference comes in between who the technician is and who the employee is. So let's go back and modify that ticket one more time here using modify service ticket. So we'll pull up Mr. Anderson. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you now, if I go and modify, let's say, reglue bridge, I'm going to modify the service to be default employee as the technician for the bridge. And for the neck, I'm going to modify that service, and I'm going to make that one be for Bill, because why not? I'm Bill, right? So let's do that. Let's resave the ticket. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that modify ticket by tech. The idea here is when the tech logs in, and they want to see their kind of their workflow for the day or what they've got as far as their tasks. When they come to modify service by tech or ticket by tech, they're going to see what they have that's been assigned to them. You can see how this is showing the acoustic electric guitar here. Now, if I switch this to be Bill, this is also showing the acoustic electric guitar because Bill was assigned to reglue the neck while default employee was assigned to reglue the bridge, and Brett wasn't assigned to do anything. So we're going to make fun of Brett anytime we can. I'm just kidding. Brett and I are good friends. But that's kind of the idea. So when you come in as the technician, you could then select what it is that you're working on. We'll talk about some of these other fields here in just a moment, but by basically double clicking on it, it takes you straight to that ticket, and then you can modify it from there. So that's basically the gist behind that. And ultimately, once you're done working on the item, so we can see, like I said, that default employee was assigned to regluing the neck. So you can either click on modify service. I guess technically it was the other way around. You can either modify it, and when the work is done on any given service, you can come in and you can check mark this completed box, and that'll fill in the date that it was completed. Now, you can do it that way, or you could just click right here where it says completed, and that basically does the same thing. You'll notice if I modify the service here, it now is showing that as completed. Now, that's not necessary, but that's a great way of making sure that things are being done, especially if the ticket has, let's say, several different things that need to be done to the item, and it's going to take some time to get those all done. It can't be done in a day or less. Maybe the item was just completely mangled, and you're going to have to spend maybe even several weeks working on it. This way, you can make sure that things are being done in a timely manner. And that does kind of take us to the promise date that you see up here. The promise date is coming from a system variable. The system variable, I believe, is just named as service promise or promise date or something along those lines. But it's kind of a X number of days out from the original date in which the customer can expect reasonably for their service to be completed. Now, you can, of course, modify this at your leisure. Some stores opt to just get rid of the promise date entirely, but this way you can give the customer an idea of when they should expect their service to be done. And this also brings me to the schedule button. So the schedule button basically lets me see what is in the shop at any time. So right now I've just got this one ticket in the system. We can see that default employee is assigned to regluing a bridge, and Bill Steppen is assigned to regluing a neck. These things can be sorted by promise date, by employee, by date, by ticket. Any of these columns that you see here are sortable. So the idea there is, before you either assume any promise dates or give the customer any kind of expectation, you can look at your work schedule at a glance, see what's all in the shop, and based on, again, maybe either your expert eye, or if we're not talking about the technician, if we're just talking about a front counter employee, they could look here and they could see, okay, the Bill Steppen, who is the technician assigned to this product, we can see that they have X number of tickets open, and the promise dates are maybe within that time frame. So we could say, well, he's probably going to be maybe a couple of extra days or whatever the case might be. And this is all about communication, really. So having all this information at your fingertips is going to be super helpful in maintaining a good level of confidence that your service staff is going to be helpful to getting the problems rectified for the customer's product. Now, this also leads me to the master ticket concept. Every ticket can only be for one product. You can see how basically there's just the one SKU field here. Let's say that Mike also brought his flute in for servicing. What we can do is we can specify that this is going to be now a ticket that is linked together with another ticket via what's called a master ticket. So that's this MT button, and that's what this master field up here is for. You'll notice if I click this MT button, it fills in this master ticket field with basically the ticket number and an M in front of it. And when it's also done, and I didn't point this out, but down here along the bottom, there is these two checkboxes that say add another ticket and retain master ticket number. And it's automatically checkmarked those for me. So basically when I save this, and of course, I could print out another copy here if I needed to. But the idea then is, and it probably actually, yep, there we go. So what this is now basically doing is it's adding another ticket. You can see this is actually now ticket number 1010, 1010, but it's kept the same master ticket number. And now from here, we could put in the flute that he's servicing or that he's bringing in for servicing. And that way you can link multiple tickets together with the master ticket. You can see that how even up here in the upper left corner, there's essentially a table of all tickets linked with that master ticket reference. So there's the original ticket 1008. Now we're adding another one. Now, another time-saving feature that can be helpful is this inventory button over here along the bottom cluster. And what this lets you do is select inventory from the customer's history, both purchase history and service history. So here's a flute that the customer actually just bought a few moments before we started the webinar. And by selecting it, you no longer have to scan it in or fill it in because we're basically pulling in the details from either, in this case, the previous record of inventory, or in other cases, the item that the customer has brought in previously, even if they didn't buy it from you. If you've keyed it into a service ticket in the past, it'll also show up on this inventory listing. Excuse me. And then that way you'll be able to just pull it in without having to retype it in manually. So that's kind of the idea there. The other thing I want to point out over here is this history button. This history button is specific to the item that we're servicing. And the concept there is you could actually look back and see specifically what services you've done in the past. In this case, for a flute, that might be repads or cleanings or whatever it might be. It'll show you when that was purchased, what the ticket number was, the date of it, the technician, what you charged them, and how many hours was spent on it. And that can be super helpful just to make sure that you and the customer are on the same page as far as what's actually been performed by your service shop. In some cases, maybe the customer is confusing you for a different shop and they're coming in and blaming you for shoddy workmanship. And then you can say, well, that wasn't anything that we did in our shop here because here's everything that we've done for you for that product. Or if it is the case where they are disputing maybe a past service, you can always then see when that was done. And maybe they're going to say, well, my guitar is already out of tune and I just brought it in last week. Well, you could say, well, we did tune it for you, but that was last year, not last week. Or you could always go back and you could contact the technician that was listed as being the technician responsible for the service. So you could then question them as far as what they recall of the service being performed. Dennis is asking, is there a way to easily switch between tickets from the modified ticket screen when you have multiple tickets that are linked with a master ticket number? I think I'm understanding that, Dennis. So in other words, if you want to be able to switch from one modified ticket to a different modified ticket, well, let's just go ahead and save this one. I guess we do need to have a service on there. So let's go ahead and pull in a repad just to get something on there. So let's go ahead and save that. Now I'm not sure if there is actually a way of just basically switching from one to the other, because that table really up here in the upper corner is just for reference. But what you can probably do is, and this kind of does actually lead me into this other function here where it says this add or change master ticket. When you're doing an add or change master ticket, and we'll pull up Mike again here. The idea behind this is you can look and see all of the tickets that are associated not only with a customer, but also with a master ticket. So you can see how there's these two tickets that we now have open for the customer. They both happen to have that master ticket. But if maybe the customer had brought in multiple tickets or multiple items for servicing, and they were not linked previously, or you would like to link them, you could actually go right in here and add a master ticket to an item. Now, I don't believe you can modify it from here. Just looking to see if there's any kind of right-click functionality along those lines. You can see how there's things in here for updating statuses or changing promise dates and things of that nature. But I don't think there's kind of an easy way to quote unquote switch from one ticket to another when they are linked with that master ticket. It's kind of just basically going in, regardless of the master ticket, you're basically just modifying the ticket using one of these three options, either straight up modify service by customer, by technician, or by reference. This third option, by the way, is specific to the ticket number, not the master ticket number, although let's try the master ticket. Yeah, there's no ticket specifically associated with a master ticket because it's not looking by master ticket. But the idea behind that field there, for those of you who are wondering about that, the idea with this modified ticket by reference is you can set up the system to actually print the ticket number as a barcode on the product or on the receipt. And then if you have a barcode scanner connected to a computer where your main function is to modify these tickets, you can quote unquote scan that number, because as we've discussed in the past, barcodes are basically just glorified keyboards, and then that would go ahead and pull it up. So letting you know that it's open on this computer. So we're just gonna go ahead and pull it up here anyway. But that's basically the idea behind modifying tickets by reference. So yeah, back to your question there, Dennis. I don't think there's really a way of modifying them or switching between one ticket to another when it comes to just using that master ticket number. But usually you would just be using that reference number directly or looking them up by the technician, if that makes sense. Brett is asking, how do I set up the barcode for ticket number? And that is a system variable. So back in the system variable settings, if you're again a TriTech veteran when it comes to the system variables are where a number of different functions can be found. Let's go ahead and search for all of the service related variables here. And if I remember correctly, it is something like a service barcode variable. I'm actually not seeing it here. Let's instead of searching by data type service, let's search for barcode. So it's actually probably just using this receipt barcode variable here. So the idea here is you would basically change this value to a Y, and then what you want to make sure of, Brett and everyone else, is that you have this free 3 of 9 barcode font installed on your computer. Now you can get that from right off of our member portal. It's available as a free download. The idea behind that is basically barcodes are actually just fonts. And if you turn this on and you don't have this installed, then what it would do, let's just go ahead and save that so we could take a look at what this might look like. So let's go in and modify a ticket. So we'll just go ahead and pull up Mike again here, and we'll pull up that ticket number 1008. And I'm just going to print this to screen so everyone can kind of see what this would look like. So I'll just go ahead and do something on here. Let's just add a service and just do something. Let's actually just flag one as completed. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to print this to screen. So you can kind of see, again, let's see if I can get this. Not sure why this is being so obstinate as far as, okay, I'm apologize that I can't get this thing to show the way I want it to, but maybe you just happen to see, if it showed up there for you on screen, that down at the bottom of the ticket, it was printing basically that barcode. So as long as you've got the font installed on this computer I do, and you've got that variable turned on, then it'll print that barcode basically along the bottom of the ticket, and then you can scan it with your barcode scanner. So hopefully that helps out there, Brett, and everyone else who's attending. That's pretty much the gist of the process here when it comes to the service module. So again, basically you're modifying it. Now, the thing I do want to follow up, of course, is how to complete a ticket. So you're going to basically modify it one more time. And when you invoice a ticket, so basically now all the services completed, maybe you even switched it to status completed at one point, and then you contact the customer to let them know that the service is ready for pickup. Notice how down here right now, with the status being completed, the amount paid is 0. As soon as I change this to invoice, it's now going to ask for the full amount to be paid. And we can see we still do have that previous deposit of $35 here. So when I go ahead and save this, now two things are going to happen. One of them is basically going to happen in the background for you, is this ticket's going to be essentially completed and finalized, and it's no longer going to be able to be modified. So you're not going to be able to pull it up in modify ticket. And when we save it, it's going to ask how that $67.49 is being paid. So first of all, we're going to apply that credit, and we can see how this is showing us in the apply credit box. It's showing that $35 there. When we click on it, it's actually showing us that this $35 is in the form of a service deposit. So you should never have any questions as to what the actual deposit is there for. Hopefully I've circled it enough times there with my little on-screen highlighter. Now let's go ahead and select that. And basically what that would then do is that would apply $35 against that. And now the total amount remaining to be paid is the $32.49, as you can see up here in the upper corner. I'm just going to say that we're going to take another $35 in cash, so 20, 10, 5. It's now going to show me $2.51 in change. I'll finalize that. We'll give them their money, we'll give them their receipt. I'll print this to screen again in the hopes that I can try and show this. You can see how now this is showing the invoice over there, and it's all paid in full, and that is now completed. And of course, there's my change due again. So that's the idea behind how services work. So basically you can modify it as many times as you need. The other thing I wanted to mention in relation to that, if we go back and modify that other ticket, so let's go back to services and modify service ticket. We'll just pull Mike up again here, and this will take us to that other ticket. The other thing I wanted to show down here in the corner is this status history function. So throughout the course of servicing a ticket, you may find that the actual status is going to change a number of times. So maybe it comes in initially as a work order, and then the technician actually gets a chance to review it. They update the service with what they feel needs to be done, and then it gets switched to a status of estimate. The customer actually approves it and signs off on it, so then it goes back to a work order. Maybe throughout the course of working on it, the technician realizes that they don't have the necessary parts to complete it, so maybe you have another status code for waiting on parts, and so then you would switch it to that status, and then the parts come in, so it switches back to a work order, and then it finally gets switched to completed, and then ultimately to invoiced. Well, at any time, if you want to see when that status changed and who changed it, you can click on this status history button and it'll show you basically the date and time stamp that that status was changed, the original status that it changed from, what the new status was, and who was the employee on record that changed it. So that's kind of another thing that I wanted to make sure everyone was aware of when it comes to these service tickets, was the status history. Now we have a few moments left. Actually, I'm going to talk about a few reports. But before I get to the reports, I did want to talk about this whole concept of letters. I think we're going to explore this in more depth in a later webinar, but the idea behind letters is this works in conjunction with your service table, and it's basically a way to help not only keep your customer satisfied, but also as a way to potentially drum up some additional service business for you. So let's say maybe the customer brings an item in for servicing. Let's say it's a tune-up or a cleaning or whatever it might be. And maybe it's something that you recommend get done on a regular interval. By clicking the letter button, you could then add a letter with a target date sometime in the future. Let's say that you want to recommend that a restring be done for well, this is a flute, it's not a guitar. So let's choose August 1st, and you would choose a letter from your Word template section as far as having a service letter available. You would choose the template for that, and then you would choose the recommended service. And the idea behind that is when it comes time for that service to be recommended to be performed, you could run a report called Service Letters by Date. Let's say you run it for August 1st through August 31st, and any service letter entries that you've saved into that would have those letters get printed out and or emailed to your customers. So basically, it's just a way to, again, send out some recommendations and make sure that customers are keeping their product investments in tip-top shape, and also making sure that you're staying in touch with them. Let's talk about a few reports, and I do see some questions coming in, and we're getting up to the end of our session as well. So a few reports that you're going to find handy. Let's go into the reports section specific to services. So right off the top, you see there is an outstanding services report. This is going to be a great one for making sure that you can see exactly what's in your shop at any given time. If you did want a printout of your service table as a whole, excuse me, this can be handy for your front counter staff just to have something that they can glance at. Maybe you have this printed out and affixed to the wall or whatever it might be. You also have service tickets by service. So the idea here is if you want to see exactly what's in the shop for a restring or a repad or a motor replacement or a cleaning or a bore and trigger replacement or whatever it might be, you can list out your service tickets by service. You can also list them out by status. Again, a great way of saying, let's see what's all in as estimates that need to be followed up on, or completed tickets that the customers have forgotten to come back and pick up, or whatever it might be. Kind of this, again, it's kind of the same thought for services by technician. You can see exactly which technicians are assigned to either work that still needs to be done or that has been done. The serial items without hours update gets back to that whole service interval concept, which again, I would recommend that to stay away from. That's kind of a deprecated function. Here's the service letters report that I just mentioned. Service history by inventory. If the customer is requesting exactly what was done when, you could print out all the service history for their given serial number or merchandise, whatever it might be. And then services without history. If you just want to see exactly what has never actually been taken advantage of in your shop, that could be a handy little report as well. So that kind of wraps up the reports, and there's a number of questions coming in, so I'm going to jump over to those, and that does, like I said, kind of conclude our module mechanics series. Now, again, I apologize, I haven't finalized exactly the March schedule of webinars, but rest assured we will have webinars the weeks of March 11th and 25th on those Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Stay tuned to our Facebook and Twitter feeds, and we'll also be sending out, I believe, a kind of a quarterly newsletter here very shortly. So one way or the other, you will be notified of the upcoming webinar calendar. And of course, you can always just check the member portal if you want to see exactly what's there so that you can also register for it. That's something we would recommend as well. And if you need links to past webinars, let me know. I can get that to you as well. And without further ado, let's make sure we get everyone's questions answered here. So, going back up to the last question that was not yet answered, Christopher is asking, does the service module handle zero cost payments from customers who may have an extended warranty? Yes, it certainly does. You can put products in there that have either a zero cost to the service because you're basically not going to bill them, or you could also technically, and this is something that other stores have done, you might actually establish in your payment categories area of ledger maintenance, you might actually establish a payment method specifically known as warranty work, and you could expense that to a ledger account that keeps track of how much warranty work has been performed. It's entirely up to you how you want to do that, but I've seen that be done in both ways, both where the amounts have been zeroed out because basically there's nothing that's going to be charged to the customer, or you can set up a payment category for warranty work. So either way, I think, Christopher, both of those are perfectly reasonable ways of tracking warranty work. But if you have any specific questions about why you might choose one over the other, definitely let me know. We can always come back to that here too if we have some time, but I do see a number of other questions coming in. So I want to make sure I get everyone's questions answered. Phil is asking, can you run through the estimate process and how to process an approval or a decline? Yeah, I can. I wasn't sure if I was going to have enough time for it today, Phil, but I think we do have a few moments here. So the idea, or what Phil is mentioning, is back in the service module menu, there is this whole idea behind sending estimates and approving estimates. Now, when you send an estimate, what you basically want to make sure you have is back in your service maintenance and the status code specifically, you want to make sure that you have at least two statuses relating to estimate. So technically actually three. So there's the estimate that's being sent out, and then there would be two status codes for the estimate being either approved or declined. Because what you're going to see here is if I select this estimate status, it then wants to know if someone approves it, what should it be switched to? So we'll say it's going to switch to work order, and if it's going to be declined, then what should it be switched to? So what you might want to have in that instance is something like a service declined estimate, and this also kind of gets into this whole expiry days concept. The idea is if it is an estimate and they don't approve it, how long before basically the ticket closes itself out because they haven't actually responded to it. So basically you can basically have a ticket close itself out after a certain number of days of inactivity. The reason I mention that is you might have a ticket or a status code for service declined where the expiry days is 1, and it would just close itself out as far as just kind of wrapping itself up. Now that's up to you if you want that to happen. Some stores have opted to make the decline status basically just be a kind of a completed, no work done type status, so they can review that at their leisure. But that's basically kind of the idea behind the way estimates work. So when you send a status, it's going to look for, and I'm not going to save that because I don't have the time to kind of save it entirely in its as it happens. But the way that works, Phil and everyone, is when you flag them with that status that's been flagged as an estimate status, this send estimates function would essentially do a blast of these tickets to go out via email or via some other kind of notification, either a phone notify or an SMS notify. You could use the word template function if you wanted to basically just have it be emailed out. But then they'll go out as being sent. And then as customers respond to that, you can go back to the module and you can go to approve estimates. And basically you will, all of the ones that have been sent out will show up here, and then you can right click and either say that it was approved or that it was declined. And then, as I mentioned, it would either then switch it to the status that it was approved as or the status that it was declined as. You can also approve all or decline all. But that's the idea there. So hopefully, again, Phil, I wanted to try and maybe give it more time. I probably still will in a future webinar that dives deeper into the service module. But that is basically a rundown of the estimate process. So hopefully that helps out there. Excuse me. Brett is asking, if two items are in on a master ticket, can I invoice both in the same transaction, or do they have to be separate? You can essentially do the function here in the service module known as charge master ticket. So by charging a master ticket, basically what that would do is that would take that master ticket number and it would switch it to an invoiced status. And so basically it would have any tickets that are affiliated with that master ticket, they would get invoiced. And in this case, they would just basically get charged to the customer's account. And then when the customer comes in to pick those up, instead of invoicing them using the change ticket function or the modify ticket function, you would just go in and take a payment using the open account payment program at point of sale. Hopefully that helps out there, Brett. Thank you very much for the question. That was actually something I did want to make sure I had covered and completely forgot because reasons. Andrew is asking, we have some of our services set up in the service table, including the labor rate and the price for repair parts. If we choose one of those services and need to change it to another one at a later time, AMSI will not update. I'm trying to read this. AMSI will not bring in the list of parts associated with the new service. This causes some problems with inconsistent pricing on service tickets. Is there any hope of changing this behavior? Quite honestly, Andrew, I'm having a hard time reading your question. I'm not sure if you're meaning that you're actually changing a status or if you are adding a service, changing a service versus adding a service, or if you're actually changing it on the service table. Hopefully you can elaborate. I know we're actually kind of running a little bit over on time here, but hopefully I can try and, if you want to follow up with maybe an addendum to that question here in the questions box, and we can try and get that answered for everyone. I'm just having a hard time reading your question and making sure I'm getting the gist of it understood. Amy is asking, where can you populate the letter drop down under service letters? Definitely, Amy. Since I mentioned that, it's only fair that I show you where that's done. So in maintenance in general, in your maintain Word templates, once you've set up a Word template in Microsoft Word, you can then use this maintain Word templates area to point not only to the file of the Word document that you want to use, but then you want to make sure that in the auto-generated code associated with it, you use the option for service letter. Now let's see exactly where that service letter option is. I thought it was actually called service letter, and I'm not seeing it specifically there. Maybe it has just been consolidated to the service ticket. I'm actually going to look into that now because there used to be an auto-generated code for service letter there, and I'm not seeing that. So I'm going to look more into that, and if I have an update on that, I'll let everyone know. But that is basically where you would set those up. So as long as you've got it with the right code, then it will show up in that dropdown when you're setting up the letter to be sent at a later date. Marianne asks, how do you add new service status codes? Sure. back in the maintenance area of service status codes, you basically just click the add button, and then you give it whatever description, whatever status code you want, whatever the code is versus invoiced or not invoiced, and by adding it to this table, they'll show up in your drop-down for status codes on the tickets themselves. Brett is saying guns specifically. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, Brett. I apologize. Andrew asks, is there a way to create multiple service tickets as a batch in V12? Again, I apologize there, Andrew. I think I know what you're referring to. In version 11, there is a kind of a batch service function. I don't believe that that is available as of right now in version 12. I'm going to look more into that as well for you and get back to you on that. Dennis asks, what happened to the right-click discount all services and parts functionality that V11 had? How can we easily discount services and parts in V12? And will the service ticket show the pre-discounted amount somewhere on the ticket? Actually, I again apologize there, Dennis. I'm not exactly sure the right-click functionality that you're mentioning. It's been some time since I've explored the right-click functions in this portion of the program, but that is something that I do have noted here and I will look into and get back to you on there as far as that functionality. It could be something that we just need to make sure does get added into version 12, and it may be there that something had been a roadblock or a road bump as far as that process, so we'll definitely look into that. Andrew is clarifying what I mean is if we add a service onto a ticket, then choose a different service at a later time with repair parts on it. The repair parts on the new service do not get added into the ticket. I'm going to probably actually recommend that you phone into technical support on that one, because quite honestly, it's if I'm thinking what you're saying is happening, it sounds like basically it's just not pulling in those repair parts, and they should. And again, maybe I'm just having a hard time visualizing it since my brain's kind of going all over the place with the different questions, and so I do apologize. But that does kind of sound more like a support-related thing rather than a function-related thing. So I would definitely recommend phoning into support, Andrew. Brett says, my last question on multiple service ticket checkout only regarding guns for the A&D book. That actually should, okay, I think I know what you're saying now, Brett. So in other words, when you're invoicing them, they need to affect the A&D book. And for those of you not in the firearm industry, the A&D book is the official form for that the ATF is wanting all gun stores to update when guns are on premise, so that they can refer to that if necessary. I'm going to look into that, Brett, because I believe that should not be a problem. When they're invoiced, they should actually get and then later on paid. They should go ahead and get disposed of, quote unquote, at that time. But I'll look into that as well. And then Marianne is saying, can you still use Control T to access the new service ticket? Marianne, yes. So as you can probably see up here, there are no hotkeys in the new version 12, and that's just kind of a testament to the different way that menus are generated in this format versus kind of the more traditional drop-down menu. Now, what you can do is you can, of course, set up a button that takes you right to a new service ticket. And basically, you could have that right there on the main screen. Of course, there is that function built into point of sale already. There's a new service ticket button right then and there. But you can also set it up so that the Alt functions, the Alt buttons, like for example, right now, if I hit Alt M, that takes me into the modules menu because the M in the modules button here has been set up basically as a hotkey. So control hotkeys, Unfortunately, I don't believe are going to be a thing in version 12, but again, you could have a button that takes you right to a function, and if you'd like, you can also set up your own custom hotkey button for that button. I did go over that in my webinar on setting up menus, so if you were not in attendance during that webinar, definitely let me know and we can get you a link to that webinar, because I talk all about setting up custom buttons in that menu or in that webinar, and I think you might find that handy. Dennis asks, if an item comes in for service and the estimate includes two distinct options, for example, the technician recommends a repad of an instrument, but the customer may choose to go with replacing 5 pads, would you recommend generating 2 separate tickets for the item, or is there a better way of showing two different service options on a ticket? Thanks for your patience with all the questions. Smiley face. No problem. The questions are what keeps me learning and keeps these webinars interesting. If there were no questions, then it would be pretty boring. So let me just make sure I understand here. So the item comes in and the customer can basically go down one path or the other. So if you did them on if you did both estimate options on one ticket, technically what that could do is that could potentially show an overestimate of the charges in the total area, because it is just going to total up all line items regardless of whether or not they're grouped in one or the other, because there's not really a way of separating two or more services on the same ticket. What you would probably want to do if you did go that route is you'd probably want to put some notes on the ticket relating to that, saying that they could basically choose one or the other, and you could even label them as option A or option B or option C in the ticket notes on the service. Or the other option is to set them up as 2 different tickets, and that would of course take up some more time. But that may be the better option, because then technically the ticket itself would show in the total area a better overall amount of the estimate of service. And then basically you would just close out one as not having been paid or worked. You could have a repair status code of canceled or declined estimate, and then you would zero out the amounts, basically saying that they were not done. I could see advantages to both and disadvantages to both. So obviously, the disadvantage, as I mentioned in the first option, would be the inaccurate estimate amount. But once you got past the total amount and they basically chose one or the other, you'd be going in and editing that service ticket and removing the options that the customer did not go with. And so basically, the history would be cleaner. Two, the other option then would be the advantage of having the 2 or more tickets would be you'd have a kind of a more complete history, I suppose, because then you could basically say that the estimate was offered and declined, but it would be kind of more labor intensive. You'd be basically keying in tickets that could potentially wind up going nowhere. So I guess the choice is yours there. I don't necessarily have a recommendation one way or the other. If it were me, I would probably be doing the first option, just because it would all be on one ticket, and I would be mentioning in the notes that the estimate total reflects technically both, and you would be choosing one or the other or the third, and then I would just be updating that accordingly. So I think that would be the way that I would go if it were me and my service shop. So hopefully that helps out there, Dennis, and everyone else who is still here. It looks like a good number of folks have kind of checked out. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, but of course this has all been recorded, and I'm happy to make sure everyone gets their questions answered. I have quite a bit of homework for me after this one in regards to the questions that have been asked. So I'll be making sure to follow up with everyone who has outstanding questions Brett and Andrew and Chris and Dennis and everyone else here. And if there's anything else that we can do, of course, give us a shout. We want to make sure that you're getting the most out of your MSI system, and that's how we grow the software and make it better for you every single day. So look forward to our announcement of the upcoming webinars. Look forward, as always, to the software getting better and better every single day because of your great feedback. This has been a wildly successful series of webinars, and I'm glad everyone's getting so much out of them, and we're going to be doing these for the foreseeable future. So thanks, everyone, and I hope you make it a great day.